So we are on air again. Hello, Ylva. I'm waving to you, looking into the camera, but then I turn to the screen because that's where I see you. Okay?
Hello.
Please turn on your mic. So
yes, I just did.
There you go. Right.
Can you hear me?
Hey there. Hey there. So we're reaching out to Stockholm right now, and we are having Ylva Hilstrēma, who is the curator of learning department at the most highly esteemed Moderna Museet in Stockholm. So Ylva has been curating Acclimatize project, which has been active in 2016 and is an accomplished one. And there is an ongoing project which is called Symposium for Museum Professionals in Sweden, right? Which has environmental issues of museum programming in its focus. And without further hesitation, I give floor to Ylva for your presentation. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Let's just see if I can share my screen with you. There. Does it look all right? I hope so. Okay. So thank you for that introduction. I'm, as you heard, Ylva Hilstrēma, and I'm a curator with the learning department at the Moderna Museet in Stockholm. I want to start off my talk with this quote, which I'm sure that some of you have already come across at some point, but it's a good quote, so it deserves repeating. It's Guy Speth, lawyer and environmental activist, who has said this. I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that with 30 years of good science, we could address those problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with those, we need a spiritual and cultural transformation, and we scientists don't know how to do that. So, a few years ago, I initiated what was to be called the Acclimatize project at the Moderna Museet in Stockholm. And in the next 25 minutes or so, I will tell you about this project and also a bit about what we're up to right now when it comes to sustainability issues at the Moderna Museet. Since I work as a curator with the learning department, I will focus on our public programs. We do also have other kinds of sustainability projects within the museum. We are rethinking how we work with couriers and transports and how we can increase our reuse of building materials in our temporary exhibitions. We are also currently changing all our lights to energy-saving LED, and our restaurant is serving lots of locally produced, organic and vegetarian food. Exhibition leaflets are collected and reused, and in our staff kitchens, we do a lot of recycling. So there are so many things one can do and so many ways to work with sustainability within museums in order to reduce ecological footprint. But today I will focus on how we have addressed these issues in our public programming. Our basic assumption is that art can inspire change in a way that science and technology cannot. And this assumption is very much in line with the quote I shared with you just now, the Guy Speth quote. And it was also the starting point for the Acclimatize project. Acclimatize was a participatory website targeting climate change through art and creativity. Between October 2016 and January 2017, anyone could participate and upload an entry to this digital platform, this website. It could be, for example, an image, a film, a text, or even a song or a dance that related to how we can create a sustainable future and fight climate change. On the site, participants could be inspired by other people's entries and by interviews with leading artists, designers, and thinkers who share their thoughts on climate change, sustainability, and the power of creativity. The top section of the Acclimatize site featured 6 filmed interviews with artists Isaac Julian, Maria Friberg, Birgitta Bergström, and Oliver Eliasson, and design collective Random International and Swedish designer Bea Senfeld. In these videos, they talked about their own engagement in climate change and sustainability and how that related to their artistic work. And this is what the site looked like when you first entered it. Actually, it is still available online, but since this was a few years ago and technology is really fast, it hasn't aged very beautifully. But one can still visit the site and see and get an idea what it looked like. So artist videos, entries, and a live section where social media tweets and posts were featured, and then a journal. And then, I'm going to now try to share with you one of the artist videos, the one with Oliver Eliasson, where he talks about how he works with climate change in his art. So I'll try to do this. It's a 4-minute video. I hope you enjoy it.
I have tried to work with climate issues in my art on various ways. I have worked with how do you actually touch the climate crisis? How does it feel physically if you could touch it? We know that the climate crisis can be very abstract because generally it's a lot of scientists who gives us a lot of data, which is very important. And then we have the media communicating this data as kind of text or pictures or films and so on to us. And sometimes I wonder, does the media in fact touch us? I've also worked with, for instance, putting ice from Greenland in the middle of the street in Paris in a public space during the COP21. This specific project, Ice Watch, was a project where I put 12 blocks of ice in a circle in collaboration with a scientist, Minik Rosen. We took the ice from a Greenland glacier. It had fallen off into the ocean, where we picked it up and shipped it to Paris. See, now that's a project which very specifically was about, well, how do we make what the scientists and the heads of states tell us available for people so they can understand it in a second. And I'm very curious about the fact that we kind of know what the climate crisis is about. We sort of understand it intellectually, but it can still be very abstract when it comes to having a physical relationship with it. What's the consequences of our action can be a very difficult question to answer. So being exposed to inland ice from Greenland is, I think, quite an interesting situation, because it puts us in front of something which is quite literally disappearing very fast, the glaciers. We measured the carbon footprint, and it was 30 tons. 30 tons was released into the atmosphere because of taking the ice to Paris. I evaluated and I thought that is actually worth it, because 30 tons is the equivalent of taking a school class of kids to Greenland and back again to Paris. So I thought, well, a few 100,000 people will actually see the ice in Paris, and of course they will see the ice out of the context of Greenland. But in Paris it was amazing, because the ice suddenly became very touching, very emotional, full of sounds, full of magic, and in that way I thought the ice would really allow for a strong physical and emotional conveyor of the climate debate. And of course what is very touching is to put your hand on the glacier. And what happens is that you go like, oh, this ice is very cold. This means that we have knowledge in our head, but physically speaking, we have not quite become as sensitive as we have been intellectually. And the question is, where does climate action come from? Does it come from intellectual knowledge, or does it come from physical experience? So with art or artworks, I think one can touch, one can touch people or touch the motivation in a different way than what the media does to us. So what gives me hope is that all the people in the world who has actually created the successes, the progress, the sort of industrialization that essentially led to the climate crisis, these are going to be the same people who's going to invent, create, and come up with solutions that can actually save the planet. So I'm full of hope that the brilliant mind of mankind is actually capable of solving this climate crisis.
So, am I back? I hope so. And I hope that you can hear me. So, one of the things that Ylva Eliasson addresses in this video is how people in Paris who interacted with the ice actually got to touch the climate. Research suggests that this type of emotional engagement is what it takes for people to change their ways and start living in a more sustainable way and make more sustainable choices. With Acclimatize, we wanted to create a platform for the same kind of emotional engagement that Ylva Eliasson's Ice Watch created, a platform where people could get in touch with the climate crisis on an emotional as well as an intellectual level. The main part of the site was an entries section, as I mentioned, where anyone could upload a contribution. A cornerstone of Moderna Museet learning is that looking at art inspires your own creativity, and creativity is central to change. So we wanted people to use their creativity in response to the overwhelming challenge we are facing with climate change. Over the course of 3 months, we received more than 250 submissions from people of all ages. And here are some examples of the things that were uploaded to the Acclimatize website during the 3 months it was up and running. Here is an Instagram account called Bokpoesi, which means book poetry. And the woman behind it is called Anna Christiansson, and she takes pages from books and she blacks out all the things she doesn't need, and she saves words that gain a completely new meaning. So here is, I decided not to ignore a future that fell apart. And that seems to be a good thing, to not to ignore our future at this point. Another Instagram profile called Anna Olsson. She has an account called Drawn by Anna. And this image is called Mend. And the idea is that we need to take care of the things we already have in the world and mend what is broken and not just produce new things all the time. And yet another Instagrammer called Garnapa. Her real name is Elisabeth Bucht, and she's an artist and a handicrafter. And she just highlights what we have at stake. A food blogger called Hanna Göransson chose to upload some images of food, vegetarian food, and she also wrote a text to go with these pictures. She wrote, I see myself as a guest who is lucky to have the earth as my host. I think the key to many things is simplicity and to give back with love in mind. Just be kind, loving, and humble, and enjoy good food, of course, always. And I must say, it does look yummy. And here, an Australian artist living in Uppsala, Sweden, she collaborated with her then 5-year-old son, and they together created a story about frogs, because this boy was very much into frogs at this time, quite obsessed really. And together, Ting, Adolphus, the artist, and the boy, they researched and found out that frogs are really vulnerable to poisons and to environmental change, because their eggs don't have any hard shells. So all substances around them are actually absorbed, and the frogs are hurt. And here are some bloggers and Instagrammers. They call themselves Babes in Boyland. Their real names are Natalie Myrberg and Matilda Hildingsson. And they chose to take pictures of things that have withered or have passed their peak, but still hold lots of beauty, just to make us see that also there is beauty also in the things that we normally just discard. To provide more in-depth perspectives, in addition to the creative responses in the entries section, there was also an editorial blog on the site, what we called the journal. In the end, it consisted of 15 texts written by professionals from different fields of expertise, one of them being Professor Johan Rockström, former director of the Stockholm Resilience Center. So we were very happy about that. So the site contained these entries where people from all over the world of all ages could upload their own creative responses to this enormous problem, and the more in-depth journal and the artistic interviews. So it was meant to be a site of inspiration and a primer of change. We saw a growing interest in the Acclimatize project over the course of the 3 months the site was open to new contributions. And since it was a digital project, we believed that it had the potential to grow almost exponentially with time. We saw that sort of curve. If we were to do it all over again today, we would definitely allocate more resources for communicating the project and to have it up and running for a longer period of time. And we would like to do it again. A lot has happened in the few years that have passed since we launched the site. Awareness and engagement has grown enormously, not least thanks to Greta Thunberg and the Fridays for Future movement. We have also seen quite a few exhibitions on sustainability and climate change in different kinds of museums, and there are so many inspiring initiatives in museums all over the world. So what if we could work together on an Acclimatize 2.0? That would be very interesting, and see what happened. Well, since Acclimatize ended in 2017, the Moderna Museet has continued working with sustainability in different ways. For example, we offer workshops on art and ecology for teenagers and philosophical guided tours centering around nature and sustainability. In these guided tours, the students get to discuss questions such as, what is nature? What happens if we see ourselves as an integral part of the climate instead of looking at the climate as something that is external to us? And all these conversations are in dialogue with artworks in the Moderna Museet collection or in the temporary exhibitions. 1 year ago, we actually invited all of the staff at Moderna Museet to take part in one of these philosophical guided tours so that we create engagement and awareness also from the inside, from within the museum core. Well, the Moderna Museet is a museum in 2 different cities since a few years back, 10 years back actually. Stockholm, the main museum, and Malmö in the south of Sweden. And earlier this year, the museum in Malmö presented an exhibition called Sensing Nature from Within. It was curated by Johan Ljungberg, and it took as its starting point the assumption that the natural world from which humanity has so thoroughly distanced itself no longer exists. With the exhibition project, Moderna Museet Malmö wanted to offer an artistic and philosophical sounding board for existential explorations of our time. The exhibition was enriched with an extensive lecture program. And this image that you have been looking at for a while now, it is a photo documentation from Ingela Irman's performance, Giant Clam. Currently, we are planning a symposium for professionals in different kinds of museums, not only art museums, and we're doing this in collaboration with Mistra Environmental Communication Project, Mistra being the Swedish Foundation for Strategic Environmental Research. It is a national symposium, and it is to be held in February next year. And with this symposium, we want to address what roles museums have to play in the transformation towards a sustainable society. Because it's not just about presenting exhibitions and displays on sustainability and climate change. Those are very good and interesting, of course, but it's not only about highlighting objects. There are other ways to work with these issues. I believe many museums think that they need to change their entire exhibition programming and focus on quite instrumental exhibitions, but I don't believe that is the case. Museums are places that collect memories and stories. And I believe museums can help people reconnect to what it means to be human and how we can relate to the world around us. These are existential matters that are key to make the necessary changes. And we need to get in touch with our basic humanness or humanity and relate to ourselves and the planet and each other in new ways, or perhaps not new ways, but in old ways, before mass consumption and before the industrialization. Going back to where I started, the top environmental problems that Gus Speth identified were, as you remember, selfishness, greed, and apathy. And perhaps these problems can be tackled with the cultural and spiritual experiences that museums can provide. So I would like to end by quoting a few lines by writer and storyteller Dougald Hine. He has put it like this: art can hold a space in which we move from the arm's length knowledge of facts, figures, and projections to the kind of knowledge that we let inside us, taking the risk that it may change us. Art can give just enough beauty to stay with the darkness rather than flee or shut down. And finally, like the bronze shield given to Perseus by Athena, art and its indirect ways of knowing can allow us to approach realities which, if looked at directly, turn something inside us to stone. So that was a bit about the Acclimatize project and what we're up to in the near future at the Moderna Museet in Stockholm. Thank you so much for having me. I forgot to say that in the beginning, but I do that now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your presentation. I'm waving into you in the camera and looking back in the screen. I had a number of questions written down prior to the lecture which concerned the art experience and the questions about the follow-up and the response to your art, but because you explained it so well that in 3 months you received 350 submissions and so on, I would rather start from the other end. And the other end is this ongoing project of yours, which is the project in collaboration with Mistra. May I ask if this is a national scale project that you are planning? And MISTRA is a national administration of Sweden.
It involves many international researchers, but the main university working with this is SLU, so the Swedish Agricultural University in Uppsala. And the symposium that we are arranging at the Moderna Museet in February will be both national and international. We are aiming to reach mainly a national audience of museum professionals. So it will be partly in Swedish and partly in English.
You see my point.
We're working with people in Prague and from all over the world, really.
Yes, yeah. You see, we see what I mean, because we are in such a dire need for more guidance and toolkits and a vision for where we should be heading as a museum sector. It just rose my curiosity of what kind of format it will be. But it's good to hear that you are practically bilingual in Sweden. You are speaking both English and Swedish, and at the same time most often turning to English. So we will be mostly interested in following your developments there in what you are doing with the symposium.
Good, and we will be happy to share. But we actually said that it is very important for us to have a symposium that is not only about people telling their success stories, talking about what great exhibitions they have created and so on, but also have opportunity to discuss what has gone wrong, what does not work, and how can we develop a toolkit for the future. So we want to be able to discuss things with people in Sweden in Swedish, so that it really gets useful and points forward. But we will share.
Right, but now for the audience that is watching you right now, can you share a little bit of your own assessment of the project that you completed, the response to your art? Did everything went well according to the plan, or you had to cancel some of the submissions? And what was in general your behind the scenes workings of this project? Can you give us a little bit more insight?
Yes, of course. It went well. We were happy with the engagement, but we realized that we stopped when it just had gained some momentum. And we had to stop because it was rather costly. People could upload whatever they wanted directly to the site, but before it got published, we had to see that it wasn't spam and things that we didn't want on the site. So every day we had to check what had been submitted and then approve it, and then it was published on the site. It was quite a lot of interaction, so it was costly, and we didn't have a budget to have it up and running for more than 3 months. We should have had it up and running for more than 3 months.
Right. And may I ask, the submissions, you mentioned some of them, but the span and the regional covering, where did they come from mostly? Was it the West, or you get something also from over the seas, from other regions?
Yes, we saw that we got most from the Stockholm region, and then from Sweden, but then also from other parts of Europe, and actually from all over the world. So we had some contributions from Uganda and Nigeria, from Australia and New Zealand, from India. So there was interaction worldwide, but I think this was also a matter of time, because first we reached the people in Stockholm who usually come to the Moderna Museet, who take part in our newsletters, who always listen to find out what we are up to. And they started contributing. And then it got known, the work was spreading, and then we saw interaction from all of Sweden, and then from Europe, and then from all over the world.
Right. And from these submissions, may I ask what did surprise you? What was the most surprising thing that came from the whole range of submissions?
Well, we were surprised and very happy to see that people with no prior experience of creative output contributed. I mean, people who uploaded things and said, well, I've never done this before, but I felt that I wanted to express myself. That was nice. But we also got established artists that participated without our direct invitation. They just did. Mm-hmm. So we were surprised and happy about the span.
Right. Okay. Well, and now perhaps a museological question: do you take something as a permanent item of your collection out of these submissions? Will there be something permanently remaining in your museum after all this work done?
No, since it was entirely digital and we didn't ask for that type of submission. That was also important, that we said we're not going to. There's no jury. We're not going to say that this isn't good enough. It wasn't about quality. It was about engagement and creativity. So then it wouldn't feel fair to keep just some things and say we want this as part of the Moderna Museet collection. This was another type of project, but it is part now of the Moderna Museet history, and I would hope it becomes sort of part of the DNA, because we need to keep development projects like these in the future, I think.
Well, that's striking you mentioning DNA, because one of the previous presentations was just called like that the environmental sustainability should become a museum's DNA, the thinking, the mindset, and so on. So, but moving beyond these lofty expressions and the visionary thinking, how does it boil down to your strategy in the Moderna Museet? Do you have a strategy for sustainable development written down in paper, or is it more sort of way of doing the culture that you have in your institution? Please tell us more.
Well, we do have a sustainability. I mean, we have a plan, and that's something we need to report. Since we're a state-funded institution, we need to report our sustainability work. So we do
have to report to your administration, your sustainable development goals that have been set to you.
Yes, we need to report how much carbon dioxide we have.
Right. Well, but it's not common. That's why I'm just double checking. It's not common in other countries that you would have already this criteria in your daily administrative, role of the administrative duties you have to do.
But we need to report that. I think all state institutions need to report that, and then we are rated, so you can see how well we're doing. So, and that's nice, because that makes it almost a bit of a competition. So we're very proud when we get high ratings.
And how does that relate or correlate to your, I don't know, payroll or the prospects of your institution to be part of something bigger? Does that correlate somehow?
No, it doesn't. It's just something, because that's always the case, isn't it? I mean, we're an art museum, so we always put art first. And that's something I think that is slowly changing. But when I started with the Acclimatize project, it felt pretty marginal. It was an engagement project. It was something that we did within the learning department. It seemed interesting. But now a few years have gone by, and sustainability, this type of thinking has become more integral to what we do at the museum. So we think about this when we create exhibitions. We think about the impact it has carbon dioxide wise. And well, actually we are talking about having a different type of exhibition program for 2022, but that's not official yet, but we have sustainability with us.
Okay. Ylva, thank you so much. Because of the tight schedule, we should be now switching to the next speaker in our great lineup of speakers today. But we really wish you good luck and the gaining of this prominence of the environmental sustainability work that you are doing. And you see already results in like 4 years. You started 4 years ago. That's great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thanks.
We're kissing you goodbye now. And we are turning now to Graciela in London. Do you hear us? Do you see us?
Yes, I can hear you and I can see you. I hope you can hear me as well.
Yes, we do. Excellent, excellent.
Okay.
Now, I'm introducing Graciela Meltsko Tronten, the Julie's Bicycle in United Kingdom. The Julie's Bicycle is an organization which is now running for 20 years and bridging the gap between the cultural sector and the environment sustainability thinking goals and so on and so on. And the presentation has been framed as, just a second. So I mentioned that the role of the organization is bridging the gap between these two sectors, and we will hear today about the program which is called the Green Program. Okay, and without further hesitation, I give floor to you. Please, floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm delighted to be speaking to you this morning. Actually, almost lunchtime for you. So my name is Graciela Melitsko Thornton. I lead the Creative Green Program. That is one of Julie's bicycle programs. Our key objectives are that the arts and culture are net zero carbon and also restoring nature. The arts and culture inspire public action on the climate and ecological crisis, and we looked at just elements of justice and equality underpins this cultural transition towards zero carbon and regeneration. We actually have been around for around 13 years. So initially we were created to work with the music industry, but slowly we expanded to all areas in the cultural practice and arts, from dance, literature, visual arts, cinema. We work across different parts of the creative community to do this. We focus on skills and training, building environmental literacy and skills across the workforce, business and operations, helping organizations to be greener, from changing light bulbs to bringing environmental into their mission and values. Creativity, helping to spark creative programming and expression on environmental and climate change, and strategy and policy. We are now working with city governments and national governments to translate all these activities into cultural policy, regional and national policy, investment as well, and funding principles. We do this because we want to see arts and the creative community actively working and contributing to a just society that lives within the ecological boundaries of our planet. The way we work is all the experience through our programs. We make it public through our learning activities and documents and podcasts. So all these are just some examples of the recent publications we've done. And it's all available on the website. So there is quite a lot of resources and tools. We got a specific guidance for museums as well. Just a few words about the climate change and ecology, about the bigger picture. When we talk about climate change impact, we are talking in general about greenhouse emissions. Bear with me, those who know this. At lower concentrations, they are actually what keeps and helps the earth warm and enough for us to survive. But what we have been doing since the beginning of the industrial age is putting more and more greenhouse gases, mainly carbon dioxide, into the atmospheres, and they are trapped and they cause more heat, causing global warming. Most of the vast majority of greenhouse gases comes from burning fossil fuels, from energy for electricity, heat, transport, manufacture, and construction. I want to point out 3 key facts from the last month, a little bit of science. September was away the warmest September in record. You take average, global average for this. The Arctic is not freezing yet, which is quite late. Antarctic, and the Antarctic has really very rapid levels of melting this summer. So these are just really 3 facts which are impacting in our weather getting more intense and all the impacts on wildlife. Since 1970, there has been actually 60% is conservative. The last report from the UN that just was published last month talk about 65% decline. Scientists are warning us that wildlife is now on emergency and is threatened civilization. And that's why, because climate change intersects with everything else, as well as loss of biodiversity, from women's access to education to the health and well-being of communities. Also, something to point out that the most disadvantaged people in the world, who are generally responsible for the least emissions, are also the most vulnerable to its impacts all across the world. Not just those in the global south, but also, for example, those who cannot afford air conditioning in India or in the middle of heat waves, for instances. Another big ecological concern of our times is the amount of plastic that is being produced. Around 80 million tons of plastic of packaging is produced annually, and this is expected to triple by 2050. So it's quite interesting how it accumulates through the food chain. Where are we now? Very briefly, we are already 1 degree above industrial levels. The Paris Agreement is the international agreement to limit warming well below 2 degrees, aiming for 1.5. So there is differences across the world. There is difference in temperatures, and the temperature increase is different in different places as well. More than half of all the CO2 emissions have been released in the last 30 years. Where are we going? We are a long way from limiting warming to 1.5 degrees or 2. We are currently on a pathway to 3 degrees. Getting us back on track is only possible if we start reducing this now. And this is why the next 10 years are really crucial. And that's, for me, the most important message we got now, particularly in the context of COVID. In the context of COVID, the European Union is planning quite a lot of different economical packages. And though it's really important that all this investment that is going to come in the next 5 years is green, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to achieve the target of reducing by 50% for 2030. The UK has a Climate Change Act. It's one of the, I think, 8 countries in the world that has a Climate Change Act. Sweden as well has one. And they are, by legislation, we need to reach net zero greenhouse gases emissions by 2050. However, lots of local government and cities think that that's not ambitious enough, and they are actually looking at targets for 2030, 2035, 2040. We have 452 UK boroughs or local governments that have declared climate emergency and are actually devising their plans. And this in terms of European policy, there is quite a lot of as well been developed this in the new Green Deal for Europe, where it looks at decarbonization, it looks at the circular economy, it looks at justice, no person or place is left behind this transition. And quite important, we need to start looking at regenerating life systems and support life systems. And that's why when we call about nature-based solutions. Let's go into museums and galleries. We believe the arts and culture can have great impact far beyond their own footprint, and they enable us to understand all these complex issues. In terms of museums and galleries, we think that they are really important because they invite us to connect with heritage, communities, and environment, think and see the world and their relationship with it in a different way. Also, question and challenge views and understanding as well, and imagine and articulate positive futures. And that's quite important to be part of inclusive and participatory institutions as well. So in terms of sustainable practice, where to start? We work with quite a lot of museums and visual arts and art galleries as well. And we use this framework to develop green strategies. We talk about commitment, where we look at governance, communication, and inspirations. Probably the emphasis will depend on what your role is. We always focus on this idea of what you can control, what you can influence, and how you speak out what's in your mind. If you have an organizational policy or a strategy, we look to the priorities within that. And we look at how your work in your department can support it. If you don't have one, we start with working with individual departments. So often we'll find that different departments like facilities, marketing, and programming are speaking to each other, which are not speaking to each other, sorry, which means a lot of opportunities are missed, particularly in large organizations. In terms of commitment, we look at policies and action plans. We look at embed sustainability in the decision-making process. Green champions are essential to drive this within organizations. Designated budgets, particularly for capital development. And we also look at influence and engagement for artist partners and audiences and suppliers. Some organizations bring all this together through targets. I'm going to put some examples in a little bit. And in terms of targets, it's important all the understanding, measure and monitor all your impacts. We use quite a lot of surveys with the staff as well to engage. And through these surveys and participatory processes, we focus where you can make a difference. And then linking all this work to the bigger picture. Sometimes it's not important where you start, probably, but it's more important to put it together in the bigger picture and look at those relationships. And this is why we talk about the cultural and art sector as an ecosystem of relationships as well. And this will bring additional benefit, additional values in terms of audience engagement, in terms of savings, in terms of driving innovation. And I'm going to look at the end about some driving innovation where we scale up after a few years of working. When we look at main environmental impacts of museums, we focus on buildings, on the work we can do in exhibitions and collections, travel and logistics, all the food element, because a lot of museums also have cafeterias or restaurants. The merchandises, because increasingly museums have been going through commercialization processes and they sell as well different goodies, and increasingly we are looking at digital technology, and we are doing quite innovative research in this space. Watch the space. We already have a webinar available in our website about the impact of digital technology, but we are going to be publishing future resources. And it's very interesting, particularly in the times of the pandemic, where so many museums are going digital. And this has an impact as well. And it's possible to do things around that. So it's a very interesting conversation that is opening it up. We have available tools, free online carbon calculators that were specifically developed for the cultural sector, and there you can plug your information and your data from events, venues, tours, productions, offices. We particularly look at the quantitative data of energy, water, waste, and travel as well. What we think about when we plan building management with sustainability in mind, I think it's quite important for us to talk about a holistic approach, a mix of solutions where we look together people, materials, systems, technology, and also we look at individual solutions which best fit the locality. We don't think that one solution fits everybody. We can be inspired by other contexts, by other realities, but we really look at location and purpose. Some organizations are bringing all these practice into environmental policies. And when we look at buildings, the main area that we look is how to basically use less energy. For museums, it's particularly important to review the need for blanket conditions. I'm gonna talk about one specific example on that. Invest in energy efficiency in buildings, buy renewable energy implement renewable energy on site, or buy renewable energy if you can do that. That's very different country by country. In the UK, we have a number of local community energy schemes where solar panels and windmills can be developed by crowdfunding. And we have a lot of cultural organizations participating from these cooperatives as well. And basically it's about taking fossil fuel out of buildings. This is an example of one organization. I look for that example because it's a heritage building, and that's where normally there is certain reluctancy to implement energy efficiency or renewable energy because there is quite a lot of concern about the architectural preservation and the heritage preservation of these buildings. But it's possible. It may take longer, really, but it's possible. So this is an example of the Walls Gallery that has focused heavily on energy from improving insulation, window glazing, solar shading as well, because our summers are getting warmer and warming, installing new high energy efficiency boilers and LED lighting. Normally, LED lighting pays off in 3 to 4 years after the investment, because you reduce so much consumption that it pays off the project. They also generate renewable energy on site through ground source heat pumps. That's a technology that is coming quite strongly in the UK. Environmental awareness and responsibilities are deeply rooted in the trust ethos. So there is quite a lot of time for staff to get trained, to get involved in environmental activities, to discuss that at board level as well, and review annually action plans. This is another example of the University of Manchester Museum. They did a new building and some refurbishment, and they had a strong approach and ambition and brief from the start. Very high level of engagement with the building users and fully understanding the needs of the different parts of the building. And this is a very pioneering approach in passive techniques to maintain environmental conditions. The building is not using air conditioning, which is very unusual in a museum in the UK. It's actually using only mechanical ventilation and a conservation heating approach to regulate relative humidity. The gallery also is very aware of the use of local microclimates through cases and seal frame techniques. And I think this is why, from a building point of view, this is why an essential element is to fully understand each gallery, each room, what's the ventilation pattern and the relationship with the building as a whole as well, with the materials. Another of the museums that is very active is the Hornigan Museum. This museum has switched to a green electricity tariff. It has its own target to become gas neutral by 2040. It incorporates ecological principles in all exhibitions. They have an environmental champion club that inspire visitors as well to make their own challenges. There is a specific role of a climate and ecological action coordinator. I think a specific role is, if you are just starting, is really important. And there's new planting schemes that look into enhancing biodiversity. As well, because we have much drier summers in London, the museum has incorporated 2 drinking fountains on site, and that it has a knock-in effect on not buying water in the cafe. And the cafe has a strong campaigning about reducing plastic. They have analyzed every single item that they sell in the cafe, and they look into how to reduce plastic in the cafe that also serves fair trade tea and coffee, locally sourced meat, free-range eggs. And recently, they incorporated a weekly market that sells vegetables and fruit produced locally every week. So that's working with stakeholders as well in other projects. This is from, we worked for a few years with the Victorian and Albert Museum, and the Green Champions wanted to do for Earth Day some special activity like a clothes swap. In terms of planning exhibitions, we are looking at how museums and the visual arts sector can use circular economy principles, which is basically keep products for as long as possible, products and materials circulating for as long as possible, and designing from the start for very little waste in exhibitions and reducing pollution, as well as allowing natural systems to regenerate. What do we look at that? We look at where materials come from. For instance, does the exhibit use resources that renew themselves quickly in nature? Does it use regional materials so we can reduce transport impacts? Is the exhibit designed with materials that can be reused later on in other exhibits when this one finishes? Or do you use principles of modular construction that can be updated or modified with new content? I'm going to show a few examples here. We also work with a lot of organizations that after our transformation programs, they started procuring timber from the Far East or timber from tropical forest, and they require every single exhibition to use timber from sustainable managed forests with as little transportation as possible. Sometimes when we were working with the Victorian Albert Museum, they find out that sometimes it was not possible to use to reuse all the cases because they were designed to a very specific size. And the Victorian Albert came with a fantastic project to use all the wood from cases into other uses. Like here you can see a beekeeper in the background, and here you can see pieces of furniture that are being produced from the cases. And this is a project which appeals to also to social responsibility and upskilling local people in carpentry, and it's really quite a successful program that still goes on, and upgrading actually the use of this material. Other museums are rethinking as well how they use materials. For instance, in this exhibition of Caravaggio and Bernini, they use, the panels are using textiles, and those textiles as well have very high level of sustainable credentials. So, and they can be easily reused. This exhibition is just about to finish in Amsterdam, in the Rijksmuseum. Other museums we work with are looking as well at recycling paint, using as much as possible in things that they got in existing stock, really. Producing their own paper for exhibitions, I think that's quite creative as well, and also consolidating networks where the different hoods and plinths and cradles can be donated to other museums as well, if they cannot be reused on site. So strengthening collaboration. In terms of programs, you had quite a bit in the previous presentation, but I just wanted to bring some examples of programs that have been very innovative in the way of looking at ecology. And this is an exhibition that the Victoria and Albert Museum again had a few years ago, where Julie's Bicycle was involved as well, where we look at fashion and its relationship with nature. So there was quite very heavily research in terms of all different components from nature used by the fashion industry through history, and it's very interesting. You can read the case study in our website as well, and it was quite solution focused in terms of what can we learn from the past to shape the industry in the future. And we are still working on a number of projects in the fashion sector as well. So it's quite interesting. The Hornigan Museum very recently had an exhibition about visualizing climate change and this link to glaciers specifically. And this is an Spanish artist that used installation from sculpture, photography, and film to explore the interactions between human manipulation of the natural world and nature's response to these interferences. So all this rubbish was taken out from the river and was exhibited actually very close to where we have our offices as well. So new materials, this is something I think that art is in a privileged situation to highlight the potential for innovation. There is quite a lot of ambition in terms of the potential of fungus, of mushrooms for the future to be used as insulation, to be used in furniture. And we recently had an exhibition in Somerset House where Julie's Bicycle got its offices, and it's been really very, very well received in terms of innovation. This exhibition was from the Museum of Art, Architecture and Technology in Lisbon, and that's basically to raise awareness about the impact of plastic in seas. The exhibition was, there was a large commissioning piece made up of plastic waste as well as boats collected on the county's coastline by a volunteer group called Brigada do Mar. And this group started out in 2009 with the objective of cleaning up coastal areas and protecting biodiversity. Every year they are able to clean up 28 miles of beach, removing between 20 and 30 tons of plastic litter. And again, these are new opportunities for collaboration and to make a difference and to restore the environment, and they can be amplified without any doubt by the museums and gallery sector. We are working as well with the Serpentine Gallery through research, and this is a group that the Serpentine Gallery hosts called General Ecology. And there is a very, very interesting conversations between artists, galleries, scientists, and you can listen many of these presentations in their website. And last one, our own campaign that is called Season for Change, and through a series of commissioning and public engagement, we are looking at how the art can engage with environment through culture. So very briefly, I'm not going to touch all the environmental impacts because we are almost there in terms of time, but very briefly, we do look at travel and art trade, particularly where there's been such an increase in international activity. We are bringing we are linking to people doing quite a lot of innovative things. This is a case that can be reused, rock balls, and we are talking and try to bringing more light to the conversations we are having with art freight companies as well. And this is why I was talking about the importance of policy and scaling up. In the UK, the arts, anybody like in Sweden, anybody receiving funding from the Arts Council, not just state organizations, but also private organizations that receive funding from the Arts Council, and this is around 800, 900 organizations a year. You need to report your carbon footprint and your waste production, and have an environmental policy and an action plan. And every year you do that through Julie's Bicycle website, and every year we review what different organizations submitted, and we analyze all this information, and we publish an annual report that the Arts Council England uses for their policy development. Organizations are consistently reducing carbon emissions. That's what we can see. It's coming down to 35%, direct energy consumption down by 23%. This can represent a financial saving of around £16 million. And this has given a space to new skills and knowledge, like clean technologies, new services, new solutions, and this generates a new circular economy within the arts as well. And the signs that we see on this is that 78% of the organizations now included environmental sustainability in their core business strategies. 38% have directors or board level representatives with a specific environmental remit, responsibility. 47% are trialing new sustainable production or exhibition methods, and around just under 30% are looking at ethical sponsorship as well and new partners. And this is very interesting because Julie's Bicycle started working with Arts Council 10 years ago, but now other funding organizations are following this model as well. For instance, is the British Film Institute now is asking all organizations asking for funding, an action plan and an environmental policy as a condition of funding as well. So, and we are having quite a lot of international conversations where different countries are looking at this model and learning from each other in terms of experience, what worked, what it didn't work, and also each country will have to find their own solutions as well. So we are on time, so it's time for questions. Thank you very much for listening. So, and I think I'm gonna try to stop sharing. So,
right, Graciela, thank
I
you.
can
Thank
see
you so much.
you.
Thank you so much for this presentation. Very to the point, and from the perspective of a consultant. The previous ones were from the museum practitioners, who some of them have already some quite developed strategies and some just getting started. And perhaps first question might be, after hearing all these sophisticated examples of circular economies, is how to make a case in the first place for changing the mindset in institutions. Perhaps a few words about that.
Yes, how to make a case. I work within cultural institutions as well, so I can understand how it feels. So the first thing when I was developing an environmental management strategy for the arts and leisure sector of a city here in the UK, the first element that they asked me is we need to focus where we can save money, because local government is always looking for saving money. So one element of developing an important element of developing the business case has been, okay, so how is this going to save us money as well? Looking at efficiencies in waste management, looking at efficiencies in energy efficiency, and then looking at all the element of engagement with citizens and visitors as well, because these are new topics, but there is a growing interest in citizens are expecting arts and cultural institutions also to develop responses to the ecological crisis.
Right, fair enough. Imagine I'm a museum director and somebody is making a case you will save money. Then the next question would be, logically, how do we monitor it? You showed us some slides where does the data come from and how you effectively can monitor the benefits, the advantages.
Yeah, yes. The first, as I said, when I just started working for local authorities, the first thing to look is at bills, really. Look at your annual consumption, how much you pay for energy, how much you are consuming. And then as technology develops, there is more sophisticated systems where you can monitor. Actually, we are looking at organizations incorporating monitors where you can look every half an hour. That has been particularly useful when the museums were closed, because allowed an analysis of what's happening during one day in the museum, day and night. Some other organizations that don't have automatic monitoring, they do night surveys. And so a group of staff, they go at nighttime and look at what has been left on. What's our consumption at nighttime? Can we save from there? And how can we change it? museums are particularly sensitive because changing temperatures and changing humidity patterns in different collection rooms is a sensitive issue, but there is quite a lot to do a little bit with it if you want a almost detective approach.
Right, I see.
Exhibition
Yes.
by exhibition.
Yeah, okay. And may I ask then, how do the museums in England or in United Kingdom at the moment, when there is so few visitors, are dealing with the question that we are consuming so much energy just in vain by turning off on our lights in the morning and then turning them on when leaving the museum? What is your recommendation how to go about this insane situation when we're just burning, consuming energy in vain?
Well, we go and museums are slowly reopening, no? They have been reopening since August.
That's in England, right?
So, yes, that's in England. Yes, before that they were closed. March to August, yeah, all cultural organizations were closed. So museums are slowly reopening. Not all the sections of the museums are reopening. Lots of museums are investing in a digital strategy as well as a new way of engagement. There is a lot of learning to do in that respect. And in terms of temperature conditions, it's depending really of what you are exhibiting really and how sensitive it is. Yeah, but, and this is why we talk about not having a blanket policy really looking at actually what pieces of art that we are showing really need these temperature conditions. Can we rearrange rooms in those terms? Is it possible? Sometimes it may not be possible, really. In terms of lighting, we strongly advise to invest in LED. Now the quality of, at the very beginning, museums were really very concerned about the cold light of LED, but there is so much innovation now around LED, and that can save so much really energy costs and carbon that we strongly advise.
These are, sorry for being so basic, but these are really good tips how museums should be going about the energy consumption in these times of very limited museum attendance. I have a few more questions, but perhaps there is something that has popped up on our live streaming. Perhaps there are more questions now. Then I will ask a question about the, you have established your agency, your consultancy as almost, you have an almost exclusive role in consulting the Arts Council England, as we realize from how comes that the NGO that, or charity that is your organization has become such a prominent player in the field? Is it an exclusive situation in England, or is something that you would advise also in other countries to pursue?
Well, it depends. First of all, Julie's Bicycle is a charity. So as well, so it's not for profit, no? And we have different programs. I lead the consultancy program, but the Arts Council England program is a different one. The program we run for Arts Council England is competitive. So when they open a bid and they call for services, other organizations can also bid for this service. At the moment, the service, the program we have is running until 2022, and then it will finish. Right. So it's a program that went through competitive bidding. That's what I mean.
I see, yes.
Yeah.
So project-based, outsourced to NGO, right?
Yeah, as well, but other organizations also can bid, can participate. It's public sector contracting. So it
Right,
has
yes.
very clear rules.
Yeah. That's just a question for somebody who is organizing these things here in Latvia and talking to administration, how we should best run it in the museum sector. And with that, we have an example, right?
Yeah, probably the advantage that Julie's bicycle has is that already developed the online carbon calculator, which is free for everybody anyway. And it was something that has been already developed that puts you in a good situation really to continue providing this type of services that was developed throughout the years, and it required a significant amount of investment really. But why we are a charity also, because as I said, all this knowledge and the knowledge that comes from consultancy as well, plus all the knowledge of working with organizations funded through the Arts Council comes into all our webinars, into all our training activities, into all our publications, and that's publicly available. So, and that's why we are a charity.
Right. Okay. Graciela, we will be closing just in a few minutes, but then perhaps a very short and last question. Seeing what is happening right now in the world, can you put into a few words how you see the future of international museum cooperation? Because all the logistics will be severely hindered by the crisis which perpetuates now. Can you say a few words how you see it developing?
Yes, I think I see the museums really develop very interesting conversations and a lot of opportunity as well. I'm also South American born, and through this crisis is the first time that all the South American museums are talking to each other in a completely different way.
Right.
So it also provides an opportunity to look at, so I'm following, even I've been in England for 20 years, I'm still following what's happening in South America. And so it provides opportunities to have different type of conversations. I would say a strong focus on resilience as well, being really very flexible in terms of looking at multiple opportunities, being very open-minded. I think it's very important for museums in terms of offering different activities and engaging differently as well, and collaborating more. I think it's really a great opportunity for that. Right. And UNESCO is also looking at how to support all this process. So it's somewhere where to look, particularly in terms of the resilience agenda.
Right. Yes. Well, thank you, thank you so much for your presentation. I still didn't learn how to pronounce your name correctly. Anyway, we should have an opportunity to connect next time and talk in more detail about some of these developments that we have in the world right now. But at this point, I say thank you so much, and I say thank you to all our previous speakers, which cared for a great morning session of the Environmental Sustainability Seminar here in Riga right now at this minute. Now we are taking a break, and we will be back in about 40 minutes at 1 o'clock. Tātad vienos mēs esam no jauna atpakaļ ar sesiju jau ar mūsu vietējiem